Well, I think that Prop 50 is a big scam. They want to go and tear up the Constitution in California, get rid of the independent commission that draws the district lines and take the power away from the people. How does this go? Fighting democracy, or helping democracy, or fighting Trump and imitating what Texas is doing? I mean, it doesn't make any sense.
He is such a donor creation that he just cannot say anything other than, this is interesting. It's interesting. Haven't thought about them. I don't know. Talk about like brain melt in real time. It was wild to see.
I am extremely disappointed in Gavin. And I take it personally. I trusted his political judgment much more than that, to be honest. I mean, I thought he's done quite well in general with the social media campaign.
Yeah.
In general, you know, like standing up for Trump. I'm talking about purely in a lens of Democratic politics. He's a smooth talker. He seemed to me like a coalitional manager. That just is a sheer sell in terms of political talent, because it's like, dude, you're either pretending and you're not doing a very good job of it, or you're actually unaware of AIPAC and the controversy that's online. Both of those are frankly disqualifying in terms of just sheer political talent.
So as Gavin Newsom gambles his presidential campaign and entire political future on Proposition 50 and the California redistricting battle, there's currently a lot of chatter in certain political circles that he could be in a deal of trouble, because we are watching the anti-Trump coalition, which for a couple of months was unified behind him, starting to fracture, splinter apart, and even in some cases turn against him, both from the moderate camp and the far left or progressive camp. On one hand, we have people like Arnold Schwarzenegger, so-called former Rhino Republicans who basically have spent the past 10 years being rabid anti-Trump Democrats, right? Schwarzenegger can't stand Trump. He's been screaming constantly about the climate change. You have to do the climate change. And yet suddenly, I don't know if this is a reversion back to his Republican roots, or he's going with the times, or maybe he understands that he's not getting any more movies, so let's go in a certain direction. But he's actually coming out this week as a former and once popular and, you know, not so bad California governor, and calling Prop 50, the redistricting campaign, as, quote, a big scam. Now, could that have a ripple effect on the election itself? We'll see. We'll talk about that. But this, again, is painting the greater picture of how this kind of current push is alienating some potential independents that might not necessarily be pro-Trump inherently. Although you could say that's to worry about in the 2028 general election. We're a long ways away. That's why I also want to bring you the current war he is in with the far or progressive, or I don't even know if I'd say the far left. It's frankly kind of the mainstream of the Democrat voter base these days, according to the polls, over the Israel and AIPAC issue, because that side are not happy with him either, after he gave probably the worst possible answer to that question you could ever give in a podcast, because after all, the guy is completely fake and insincere, and on a question where it's like, hey, can you actually like weigh in on something that is divisive among our political base? He's like, that's a really interesting question. So anyways, we'll tell you about the, again, potential crisis looming here today from both sides, because former Gavin Newsom supporters, or you could say like naturally people who might be drawn to him, do not appear to be all that happy. And perhaps maybe they're coming to realize, as we knew from the beginning, this is the fakest, most sociopathic individual to ever exist in modern American politics, and that's saying a lot. As you well know, the world is facing an unprecedented rise in threats, from political assassinations and terrorist attacks to 3D printed ghost guns that can evade traditional metal detectors. Today, security incidents are at an all-time high, and there's a critical need for faster, smarter, and more adaptable security solutions. That's where Liberty Defense, listed on Toronto exchanges as SCAN and OTC markets as LDDFF, comes in. Liberty is developing next-generation security detection systems designed to protect communities and preserve peace of mind. Their flagship product, HexWave, uses millimeter wave radar combined with artificial intelligence to detect concealed weapons, including non-metallic threats, in seconds, all without physical contact or privacy invasion. Unlike conventional systems, HexWave can distinguish between harmless items and real threats, producing a 3D image that AI interprets for a simple go or no-go result. It's mobile, non-intrusive, and can be deployed anywhere, from airports airports and schools to stadiums, courthouses, and government facilities. And as you could imagine, the market opportunity is massive. The global security screening market, worth $11.7 billion in 2024, is projected to double to $25.7 billion in the next 10 years, driven by increasing geopolitical tensions, insider threats, and even a new TSA mandate requiring 100% employee screening at U.S. airports by 2026. Liberty Technology is already gaining serious traction, folks. They just delivered their HD8 upgrade kit to the TSA, a potential $100 million market opportunity, and completed installation across Los Alamos National Labs, Toronto and Manchester airports, MIT's Lincoln Labs, Palm Springs Airport, and much more. They're also collaborating at the moment with MIT and Pacific Northwest National Labs, who selected Liberty to commercialize the technology. Even the TSA itself is investing in Liberty, granting $6 million in sole source funding to enhance detection performance. And financially, Liberty's business model is already built for recurring revenue, whether it's their hardware sales through the HexWave units, software and AI maintenance updates via 5-year plans, and integration with existing infrastructure for long-term stability. Engineered and manufactured in the USA, Liberty Defense is positioning itself as the forefront of a fast-growing global industry, one that's evolving to meet the threats of today and tomorrow. With a market cap under $15 million, government backing, and proprietary AI-driven systems already being adapted by airports and agencies, Liberty Defense could be one of the most compelling under-the-radar businesses in 2025. That's why I encourage you to do your own research on Liberty Defense. This is not business or financial advice, but be sure to go check them out and learn more for yourself. So, I think it goes without saying that if Prop 50 succeeds, that's a major boost for Gavin Newsom in 2028. That's going to basically anoint him as the front runner if he was not already. At the same time, if it fails, if it falls flat on his face, then that's going to be a royal embarrassment, right? It's a huge setback. He might still win the Democrat primary either way, I would argue, because, the rest of the candidate field, who are you going to run? Tim Walz, someone like that? But with that in mind, I've been of this stance for the past month or so that I do believe Prop 50 is going to pass. After all, it's California. Democrats have pumped a bunch of dark money into the election to basically run TV ads saying that, well, if you vote no on 50, then you're supporting Donald Trump. Don't support Donald Trump. And then the whole hive mind of the state's like, yay, let's go turn in our mail-in ballot, guys. But that in mind, last polls I saw, it's leading by like 30 points or something, but it is kind of hard to poll an issue like this because it's sort of a off-year special election. For whatever reason, this week, they had to bring Barack Obama in to campaign on behalf of Prop 50, which maybe we're reading too much into that. But if you know anything about recent history, if the Democrats are deploying Obama to come campaign, that's usually not a good sign. That's actually a really bad omen, okay? So I went from someone saying I was confident Prop 50 was going to win for the Democrats to now saying, wait a minute, not so fast, my friend. Why do you need Obama? What's going on here? But anyway, check it out.
California, the whole nation is counting on you. Democracy is on the ballot November 4th. Republicans want to steal enough seats in Congress to rig the next election and wield unchecked power for 2 more years. Prop 50, you can stop Republicans in their tracks. Prop 50 puts our elections back on a level playing field, preserves independent redistricting over the long term, and lets the people decide. Return your ballot today. Vote yes on 50.
Right, well, again, this is an election that should be relatively easy and straightforward for them. Why do they even feel the need to put Obama out there and potentially cause a bunch of problems as we've seen in the past? Well, as is noted here, perhaps Democrat turnout so far is not exactly what they were expecting. Again, still the underdogs, I would say, as the Republicans. I encourage you, make sure you go vote no on 50, and let's kind of hope for a miracle in this state, given everything we know about that election system. But this is genuinely interesting, right? Talk especially about the supposed Democrat enthusiasm and perhaps the way in which the political support behind Newsom might be a little bit astroturfed, right? Might not be as real or sincere as the media or even social media are hyping it up to be, because as you can see right here, California has been voting on Prop 50 for 1 full week. So far, in a blue state, don't forget that, Democrat early returns are only leading Republican returns by 83,000 votes. Over 5 million Republicans have not voted yet. And this is also true, right? We could be winning if we wanted it bad enough, but still, again, keep this in mind, right? It's an off-year election. Democrats are supposed to be the ones energized for this. I think a lot of Republicans are almost maybe confused as to what's even happening here, but they only lead our turnout by 0.1%, guys. And, keep in mind this as well. Obviously, Democrats typically vote earlier than Republicans, and so, again, only a 0.1% lead. They're still the favorites because there's more Democrats, I should say, in California than Republicans, but still, right? Maybe this kind of explains why Obama mysteriously appears on the campaign trail a couple of days later, because they're like, oh shoot, the turnout is not exactly what we're expecting. I don't know, we'll see what happens, right? But that said, this week, Arnold Schwarzenegger did come out against Prop 50, which is an interesting development to say the least, so let's take a listen.
Well, first of all, in California, it's a big mistake to go and to dismantle and to basically kind of get rid of the independent redistricting commission under the auspices of we got to have more power than the Republicans. And we got to fight Trump. Because, yes, they are fixing the elections in Texas. But that does not mean that California should fix the elections because of that. Two wrongs don't make a right.
You don't buy what Governor Newsom's saying?
Of course not. Look, I've sat there in Sacramento. I've listened to the politicians for 7 years. They are not interested in giving any power to the people. The only interest that they have is to take power away from the people and grab it themselves. So this gives them a great opportunity by saying, oh, we have to fight Trump. Let's go and get rid of our democratic principles. Imagine to fight for democracy and to get rid of your democratic principles. It doesn't make any sense.
Right, well, this is the issue that Prop 50 is going to face with independent voters. And I'm not just talking about the California election. I'm talking nationwide when he inevitably tries to run as the presidential candidate, is that it's very hard to make all these arguments about democracy, Trump is crushing our democratic norms, and then explain why exactly you overturned and deleted a constitutionally mandated independent redistricting commission that your people voted for, right? That's kind of frankly going to be a very easy debate comeback against Gavin Newsom when they say, you're so authoritarian, you did this, you enforce immigration law. Hey, what did you do with Prop 50, right? But, anyways, needless to say, even if it does pass, and again, vote no on 50, because ultimately it's going to be a low turnout election either way it's looking like. So if Republicans really got their act together, in theory, they might actually be able to win this just based on cratering turnout, not that much enthusiasm. Again, go vote, do what you can do. But it's worth noting as well that, we brought this up before, but even as Newsom tries to fight Texas on this redistricting, he's actually just caused a total implosion for the Democrat Party, as I explained time and time again. If Newsom opens Pandora's box here and we get into a mutually assured destruction scenario and battle with Republicans fighting the Democrats and everyone redrawing their maps, that inherently sets Democrats at a disadvantage because they've already gerrymandered extensively. There's not much more they can do. It's the Republicans who have a lot to gain out of this. And that's even pointed out here because by my understanding, the current new map is meant to only counter Texas. So Texas added 5 seats. So California, according to this, is going to add 5 seats. And, it's kind of unlikely that the judges will allow them to do more than that, considering, even when you draw redistricting, you still have to be able to take that to court and uphold against legal challenges. But again, it's worth noting that because Newsom did this entire ridiculous Prop 50 stunt, we covered this earlier in the week, but other Republican states have already joined in. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's Missouri, North Carolina, and Kansas already setting up their moves to go forward. That is +3. So if you're doing the math there, it is 8-5 in favor of the Republicans. If other states like Indiana, Ohio, Florida join in, that's like +13 versus Democrats +5. Great job, Gavin Newsom, to delete the 5 seats that Texas gave the Republicans. Now you're down 8, right? And then as we pointed out again, if the Supreme Court, which is looking to do this week, does end up overturning the Section 2 racially mandated gerrymandering section of the Voting Rights Act, then you're looking at like R +19 advantage. So great job, Newsom. A fantastic political strategy here, all obviously done, as you all know, to appease the political left. Schwarzenegger continuing to not have that. Apparently, he's now coming out and calling for nationwide mandatory voter ID and torches the left's argument against it, saying, and I quote, almost every country in Europe requires ID and they make our turnout look puny. True, by the way. We should require all states to provide everyone with an ID. So I don't know what Schwarzenegger is doing. You know, maybe he wants to be on our side now because he realized that there's a bunch of girly men on the other side. There's not even men. Okay, but I don't know. But again, let's take Schwarzenegger out of it. Let's just put, bigger picture here. What is the entire point of Newsom doing this? He understands he's actually alienating the moderates in the process. That's not the point. He's trying to win a Democrat primary, which is exactly why he's trying to become popular with the radical, rabid Democrat base. Except this week, it turns out they're not really so happy with him either, as many different progressive figures on all different sides are coming after Newsom over his terrible answer on this question of AIPAC in Israel. And obviously, there is a sizable, I'm not sure if it's the majority, but a very sizable chunk of the Democrat voter base, and it's growing by the day, increasingly is super anti-Israel, right? They don't want their politicians taking any money from the Israel lobby. They don't want, a single dollar going to the country, et cetera, et cetera. And it's clearly something at the moment that appears to be tearing apart the base after Gavin Newsom gave perhaps the worst possible answer to that question you will ever hear in your life. Take a listen.
Try to do better than what we're about to hear from Gavin Newsom.
I will not vote for a candidate that takes $1 from AIPAC.
It's interesting. It's interesting. I haven't thought about AIPAC. And it's interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting. Why did I say that? Not relevant to my day-to-day life.
Okay.
Which is just interesting.
Listen.
It's interesting you say that. JPAC perhaps more, but AIPAC less and less.
Okay. Fair enough.
Which is just interesting.
What's interesting about it?
That it's just interesting as you bring up AIPAC that it hasn't been part of. I'm just reflecting quite openly and honestly.
Okay, I love this so much for so many different reasons. So obviously Newsom sounds idiotic, but now Representative Ro Khanna was unimpressed with Newsom's comments, writing that this is not interesting. It is defining for the future of our party. We must be for human rights, not take PAC and lobbyist money, including AIPAC, and call out the genocide to win the trust of young voters and have America be a moral leader in the world again. Agree, Van Lathan?
Yeah, can I just say that's the worst answer to that question of all time? You want to draw attention away from it. You want to maybe not seem so guilty of what, you're doing that the Democrat base doesn't like. Maybe you don't say, that's really interesting. It's just interesting that you say that. That's terrible. Okay, that's the worst possible way you could have answered that question. But, I'll tell you what genuinely is interesting is that this is an issue that especially the kind of progressive camp of the Democrat base really does take seriously. You're seeing even like this increasing sentiment, especially on their side, that we're not going to vote for any politician who takes any money from the Israel lobby. And obviously Gavin Newsom, the reason why he's giving the strangest answer of all time is because he fully intends to take money from the Israel lobby because he's like an establishment politician and that's kind of the norm. But again, like the far left, he wants to try to stay in line with those people. So he tries to avoid the question. Terrible way to handle it. Utterly ridiculous. And obviously it's not even just progressive media that is now turning on him over this little clip. You heard in there Representative Ro Khanna, who is a progressive congressman from California, of all places, by the way, said the same thing. He was not impressed with that answer. It was terrible. And hey, progressives, are you just now starting to notice that Gavin Newsom is like a shifty sociopath, right? We've been trying to tell you this, but you said, oh, he's standing up to Donald Trump, so therefore he's a good guy. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. Really what he is the same kind of establishment Biden-style Democrat that our kind of farther left camp of the party doesn't really like. And yes, that's going to be a really interesting divide to pay attention to in 2028. I'll say this right now. I really hope that AOC runs in that primary. I hope that she chooses to run for president instead of try to primary Chuck Schumer. And I'll tell you why. Because this is something that's going to tear apart the Democrat Party if that's the case. And other issues, by the way. Because let's be honest, as it stands right now with the established primary field, we know Gavin Newsom is the front runner. That's why I've been saying, like, even if he fails on Prop 50, I mean, who's going to replace him? Cory Booker, Tim Walz? None of those people pose a remote threat to Newsom. But of course, who actually does is someone like an AOC. Because if Gavin Newsom has become this dynamo in the Democrat base, right? People love him because he's fighting Trump and he's our icon and all that stuff. He can be outflanked from the rabid anti-Trump left, obviously by someone like AOC who comes along and says, hey, I'm more rabidly anti-left and far more insane than you. And that's going to be a really interesting divide within the party. And of course, you know, regardless of who wins, because I would argue, I think in that type of race, probably Newsom still ekes it out because the Democrat establishment will carry him over the finish line, but it will be pretty close and interesting to watch. But what that's going to do is, first of all, tear down Newsom, right? This kind of like invincibility status you can see he's had for the past couple of months in the Democrat Party, that's going to be smashed because you're going to have someone from the left really coming out, coming after them, right? And we're not talking about some random Cory Booker style clown. No, this is AOC. This is someone with her own fan base, her own following that really can rival Newsom. And that primary is going to be very competitive and he's going to have to fight. And that's going to divide a lot of Democrat resources, number one. But secondly, very likely it's further going to force him to shift to more radical left-wing policy positions in order to fend off AOC and the progressives. We see this happen time and time again. This is a similar phenomenon to what went down with Biden in the 2020 primary, where he tried to sound like Bernie Sanders in order to not seem like such a moderate. And of course, what's that going to do? It's going to greatly undermine the current Gavin Newsom attempt to rebrand as the sensible moderate, even though he's governed California like a completely insane progressive lunatic, right? Because, you know, he maybe in the national election, he can try to gaslight people and pretend like he was an amazing governor. But people are certainly going to remember what he just said in that primary. So you can't go and say, I'm a radical, crazy socialist. I'm even more socialist and insane and pro-crime and pro-fentanyl than you, AOC. And then turn around and say to the country, I'm running as a unifier. That's not going to work, right? So that's, again, going to be something really interesting to watch. But yeah, long story short, so the center not happy with Gavin Newsom because he's fighting Trump too hard. And the radical left is saying to Newsom, well, you know, you might be super anti-Trump, and I guess we like that, but at the same time, this Israel issue, you're not really on the right side. So I don't care. Let's all sit back, enjoy the civil war. I'm here for it. I think it's fantastic. And the interestingness doesn't stop because it turns out that there's even more to this interview that is getting torn apart. So take a listen to that as well.
I guess the question is, if there's an admission or an understanding that the prime minister of a country is acting in a way that's either irresponsible, callous, or inhumane, why would we continue to support that country militarily?
I think that's the executive's role to leverage that. We do that a lot. I mean, that's part of the game of leverage. But to eliminate support across the board is something, to me, is a bridge too far. Conditioning in a thoughtful way with a flexibility of a criteria, flexibility with conditions that are changing on an hourly or daily basis or weekly basis as it relates to not just what's happening in Gaza, but what's happening in Lebanon, what's happening in Iran, what's happening in Syria and other parts of the Middle East is where I think you have to be careful. And I just don't think there's a clean way of answering that without the nuance that I think it deserves.
Well, there you have the governor of California competing with Kamala Harris in the word salad Olympics. What was that? What was that? Let me just list off a bunch of other Middle Eastern countries and talk about leverage and then do the little weird like shoulder shimmy. Like, you are not guided by values or principles. It is very obvious Newsom destroyed the state of California and yet feels entitled to the highest office of this land. It's gonna run for president in 2028. I get that I am deeply, deeply biased against him as a victim of his leadership here in the state of California. But let me just give him a tip. I don't know if he's even capable of doing this, but let me just give him a tip. Be authentic for once in your life. You're afraid of Israel or you support Israel, but either one, doesn't matter, has led you to supporting Israel and backing it economically, financially, even though we're talking about a country that had an economic surplus in 2021 when we haven't had one since 2001.
Yeah, well, look, I don't think this issue is going away for Newsom. Because I do think there are a growing portion of the Democrat base that are kind of becoming like single issue voters on this issue. But even if they're not, even if they move on to something else, especially again, if AOC runs in that primary, he's going to have to explain why he's not like the furthest left on, if it's like a social issue, on that social issue as well, right? So, and I don't think the Kamala Harris style word salads, because what does that even mean? And it is a legitimate point. Like, if you're against Netanyahu, why do you want to give foreign military aid to the country? And why can't you just answer whether you support AIPAC or no? That's the worst thing ever. But I'm glad apparently the progressives are just noticing what we've said about everything, right? This isn't just how Newsom talks about Israel. It's how he talks about like every political issue that remotely he doesn't know what to say or he can't bring a justification on. But anyways, guys, there you have it. A little bit of internal chaos within the Gavin Newsom campaign ranks. That said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace.